Welcome back to another episode of the Frisky Risky podcast, guys. Got to apologize. We took a few weeks off. That's my fault, not Willy P's fault. The kid had a honeymoon that he had to attend to, but we are back, and we are back at the perfect time, if you ask me, with NBA playoffs coming to an end here soon. NFL really starting to kick it off. A lot of headlines coming out of different camps, which is awesome. The MLB season is obviously rolling. We got NHL playoffs. So many sports. It's a great time for all of us sports enthusiasts. And Willie P, with football starting back up, I had to wear the Matty P defensive shirt. Obviously, a lot of people in Detroit don't love Matty P after what he did there. Not great for him as a head coach. But as a Patriots fan, we love that Patricia, everything that he brings to the organization. So always rocking the defensive shirt, especially as football picks up. But buddy, how are you? I know you got to be excited as NBA playoffs are getting to the peak here. Unfortunately, your team, Denver, got ousted, but I know with the text you've been sending, you are still heavily involved in watching and everything that's going on there, man. So you got to be pretty pumped right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of everything we could ask for, I think, this playoffs. I mean, obviously the Denver Nuggets losing in 7 and blowing a 20-point lead at home is not how I want to remember this season. But I kind of hate to say it after I told everybody to bet the Nuggets early to win the championship. After kind of seeing them do their playoff run this year, you could tell pretty quickly that it just wasn't their year. And, it is obviously very hard to go back to back in any sport, let alone the NBA, and especially in 4 7-game series. So that was a bummer, but we got great basketball still. I mean, your Celtics, you've been worried about them all year.
Still in there, man.
They're still in
On to
there,
the
man.
finals.
They've lost, 2, I think every game, every series of theirs has gone to no more than 5 games, so you can't be too upset about that. The Celtics are rolling.
Yeah, they got a couple injuries, so I think keeping that down to 5 games is helping them.
Yeah.
Not having to push the distance, giving them some rest. That's big.
And I was talking to a good friend of mine last night, and we were kind of chit chatting, and he was a little worried that since the Mavericks could not close out the Timberwolves last night at home in Game 4, and they're going back to Minnesota, he was a little worried that your Celtics might be getting a little too much rest. But like you said, they're injured, so I think they're pretty stoked. It is wild that the NBA Finals, regardless of how late this Western Conference Finals doesn't start till June 6th. So I think even, if this goes to 7, I think they'll play till the 2nd, I believe. So, I mean, the Celtics will have plenty of time, and I'm sure they're stoked about it. Get guys healthy. They don't want to repeat what happened 2 years ago. So
it is something we've talked about on this show before, though, right? Like that balance between getting the rest, but not too much rest, where you lose your momentum, you come out stiff, you come out slow. So yeah, I definitely feel your buddy's your buddy's remarks there. It's definitely something to worry about a little bit, but like you said, I think with some of the being a little bit more banged up, the rest is good. Hopefully they're still stay locked in and come out firing. But we'll see. I mean, can the Timberwolves have a massive comeback, or was this kind of don't get swept and then kind of send it out the next game? We'll see what happens.
It is incredible to me. I respect, but also think it is somewhat of a little bit of a flaw of how confident Anthony Edwards is in his team. It is only a flaw just because they, after every close win that they've had, they love to, kind of gloat in the post-game pressers, at least from my perspective. And, Anthony Edwards was very, I don't know the best adjective used, I guess loose last night after not getting swept. And he, post-game, was like, I've never been swept in my career. And that's a great thing to say. But when you're down 3-1 in the Western Conference Finals after losing 3 straight, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. And I'll believe it when I see it. If they come back and make a historic, unprecedented comeback of being down 3-0 and force a Game 7, you can say whatever you want. But right now, you need to get back to work there and quit get that smile off your face and get back to business, because you finally had a good game last night. Your partner in crime, Karl Anthony Towns, finally had a good game last night after stinking up the joint all series. So I get why they're feeling good, but you still got a lot of work to do. So, and if anything,
Well, they call him the little Michael Jordan, right? I think it was Michael Jordan who said it's easy to talk shit when you're up, but it's hard to talk shit when you're down. So maybe he's just, he's just feeling that inner Jordan.
no, and I get where he's coming from. You don't want to be the guy that is in the locker room like, man, oh well, we won a game. You gotta keep the vibes high. And your season isn't over yet. And we've seen crazier things in the NBA playoffs. I mean, the Denver Nuggets came back from 3-1 twice in the bubble. Cleveland came back from 3-1 down in the NBA Finals and did it. Granted, that's not 3-0, but it's something. So you never know. I mean, Vegas is licking their chops already going into Game 5 in Minnesota tomorrow night. Minnesota is a 5-point favorite, so they're not thinking Dallas is going to close it out on the road. I don't think they're really going to close it out on the road either. That's a tough building to do it in. Minnesota is going to be loud. It could potentially be their last home game of their season. So, I think Minnesota is going to come out and throw everything and the kitchen sink at them just because they have to. So if Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving can kind of get back to what they were doing in the first 3 games and hit the shots that they have to hit, I think it's going to be a much tougher game for the Timberwolves. But it's hard to close out a series. It's even harder to do it on the road.
Yeah, man. You know what? Kyrie, he just seems so. I mean, he's a professional, so don't get me wrong, but he just seems so unusually level, like all the time when they're talking to him. It's just like it's just not emotion. Just hey, we're gonna come out, we're gonna play, and he's just consistent in what he does. It's unbelievable actually to watch his pressers and then watch his play. He's just it's just him. It's just like, yep, I'm just out here playing a game.
Beautiful, and it's a beautiful thing to it's a
Killing it.
beautiful thing to see because we all know what he can do in the playoffs. It's no secret. We've seen it, and it was kind of tough after he left Cleveland because he wanted to be the guy and went to the Nets, went to the Celtics. It didn't work out. And then he ended up going to Dallas after all this drama, and everybody kind of thought or at least the narrative was he was kind of washed or not playing at the same level that we all knew he could. And now he goes to Dallas, and everybody was kind of wondering how it was going to work with him and Luka. And that is just, it seems to be a match made in heaven. When those guys are scoring, I mean, my God, it is tough to stop. And, they only combined for what was it, 44 points last night. It was their lowest of the series. They've been averaging over 50 points combined in the first 3 games, and that's why they were winning them. I mean, when Luka's putting up 30 a game and Kyrie's putting up 25 plus a game, it's tough. It's tough to stop, even if you have the best defense in the league in Minnesota. So, it is. I'm really glad to see a player of his caliber and his resume finally kind of show why he has that. And it's just good to see, man. For the game of basketball, he's received a lot of criticism. I'm not saying it's all unwarranted, but at the end of the day, he's a great player, and it's just good to see him back in the form that, everybody, whether they do or don't, want to see him in. So, Game 5 is going to be good.
100%, 100%. Yeah, man. It's going to be good. Well, we're going to revisit this here a little bit later in the show. We got some top headlines to cover quickly here before we jump into some football. But obviously, the one of the biggest ones, very upsetting, very sad. Hall of Famer Bill Walton passes away. I know that's kind of been all over all sports media because it's such a big story because of everything he did for not just the game, but outside of the game and community and things like that. So that's a tough one. I never met Walton. I know a lot of people who have and never heard a bad
Yeah.
thing said about him. So that's a tough one, I think, for the sports world, no matter if you're an NBA fan or not, like, who he is and you've heard about him, what he's done, things like that. So, tough one for a lot of people, but he'll be remembered as a Hall of Famer. So
Yeah, and it's a tough thing to say, but it is kind of ironic that, of course, the year of his passing is the same year that is the last year of the Pac-12, and that is the biggest thing he is known for. Obviously, he's loved talking about the Conference of Champions, as he would call it, and I think it won't really set in, and probably until preseason college basketball starts this fall. He'd always kind of be one of the head broadcasters for, the Maui Invitational or any of those early big blue blood tournaments. And you'd always see him, that huge dude on the sideline with the headset on and his massive white teeth, wearing a Hawaiian shirt, just smiling ear to ear every day. I think that's really when it's going to hit me, and I think it'll hit most college basketball fans. But yeah, it's a bummer. But at least he's out of pain. I think he was dealing with cancer for a long time, so he lived a great life. And I don't think there will ever be another sports fan that was that big of a deadhead. And I think he should always be remembered as that as well, because I don't think any NBA player will ever look as good in a washed out Grateful Dead tie dye T-shirt. So that's another accolade that should be put
That's
on
right.
his resume for sure.
That's right. That's right. In baseball news, we got your man, Angel Hernandez, retires. Umpire known for some, let's just call them questionable calls. I know when this happened, you immediately texted me and was just laughing. So, retired. Game's going to be a little bit more between the lines, maybe now.
Maybe. I mean, we'll see what strike zones if they adjust at all. I mean, the funny thing is, I was looking at it. You're like, can you kind of just get some quick numbers of how many calls he's missed? And I couldn't get a total number, at least narrowed down for, because he had a long career. But just last year, I forgot that he only umped 10 games last year because he actually ended up having back surgery. Poor guy. And because of that, he only umped 10 games and had a short season. But in those 10 games he called, according to the MLB, he missed 161 calls, which is just incredible. And then when you hear that stat, I dug even deeper. And according to how they, pro baseball metrics for umps or whatever they call it, um, even with that massive amount of missed calls in 10 games, he's still ranked between 60th and 70th in terms of ump rankings, and there's about 85 to 90 total. So, in the grand scheme of things, he is not the worst, if you can't believe that. And that really made my eyes pop, because I was like, man, everybody always has just ridiculed and put this guy down because and I always thought he was the worst because of it too. But once you look at the numbers, he's actually not the worst. So, maybe that will maybe be a little bit of a saving grace of his career, but I have a hard time believing he's going to make it to the Hall of Fame. I don't think anybody will let that happen. So, crazy.
Dude, he might, just for the amount of controversial calls. Like they may just put him in there as a controversial call.
Maybe, dude, maybe. I don't. I mean, man, it was. It was always. I'm not the. I like baseball. It's not the cream of my crop by any means. Mostly just because the season's so long, and I'd rather focus on other sports. But it is. It, it is remarkable the impact he had on that game, and just what his reputation has become. And hopefully he has a good retirement. But it will be kind of a bummer to not look at the ump crew and not see him and be like, oh, let's see what this game's going to be like today, because Vegas was always kind of sweating when he was calling games, because you never knew which way it was going to go. It seemed like, I mean, my gosh. So yeah, end of an era, another end of an era. Two
End of an
big
era.
deaths in sports, if you will, in this week, unfortunately. So you know,
Yep. Well, football, dude, it's upon us. We got some big announcements out of the OTAs. I know the first one you were talking about yesterday, Nick Bosa, 49ers, taking it seriously,
wow.
showing up, the rest of the team taking notice. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this? Obviously, great player, has crushed it in his career, even when he quote unquote wasn't taking it seriously. So now that he is, what are we
Well,
thinking?
it's just funny because Brock Purdy, he the nice Iowa, Midwest kid that he is, I don't think he meant anything bad by him saying that, oh, he's taking it seriously, so now we should too. But in the grand scheme of things, after you've been to the Super Bowl and kind of got embarrassed based off of not being prepared for certain things like overtime, and now you're going to take it seriously, that is a bit of a red flag for me. And you would think maybe that, I don't know, the San Francisco 49ers team would hopefully have a meeting with Brock Purdy after that and be like, hey, let's not reveal all of our secrets about how this locker room is running. But yeah, I mean, obviously he didn't have the best last couple of years. COVID prevented him in 2020 from doing that. Obviously, I think it prevented most people since the world lockdown. 2021, he tore his ACL, so he was recovering, and 2023, the preseason, he was trying to get a big contract, and he did. So I understand why he was holding out. Same thing that T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are doing right now. So that's an uncommon thing. But I think after last season when he went to the Super Bowl and he only had 10.5 sacks, and in 2022 he had 18.5 sacks, I think he's finally realizing maybe I should put in the extra work. It's not going to hurt him; it's only going to help him. So I'm glad to see that he is finally. Taking full responsibility for his career and to not mince words. Hopefully, I hope that he has a killer season this year. And no hate towards Nick Bosa, but it is a little alarming to see one of the best defensive players in the league and his star quarterback not be surprised, but be relieved that he's actually doing his job. So, granted, I get OTAs are optional, but normally when things are optional at your job, they're not really optional. So, and if you want to make it optional, you can, but there are normally repercussions to go along with it. So, we'll see how he plays this year. I'm sure the extra reps will only do him good. Hopefully it doesn't cause him to get another injury. I don't think it will, but you never know. But
Yeah, and that's that's the flip side of the coin, right? I mean, I think even when they're optional and the guys aren't coming, obviously they're still working out on their
100%.
own. They're still doing things that they have to
Mhm.
do. I think it was probably taken a little bit out of
Mhm.
context. Um, Not out of context, but like you said, I don't think Purdy was probably thinking that way. Like he's probably just like, "Oh, we should all take it serious now. He's here." Um, but good to see. I mean, the 49ers have been at the cusp and just at that precipice right there. So, if this is what pushes them over the edge and gets the team to rally around it and they can do it, I mean, that'd be huge for them. So, we'll see what happens. Like you said, though, the other big announcements are the Bengals, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins not at OTAs as well. I think the bigger of those two stories is
Mhm.
Higgins.
Mhm.
Jamar Chase, yes, he's looking for another contract. I think the Bengals will do anything to keep Jamar Chase there. I don't think that's something that's not an athlete they're going to let go unless it's just obscene. And honestly, even if it is
Hey,
obscene, they'll probably still make it
yeah.
happen. Um, Joe Burrow's not going to let him leave with the rapport that those two have together. So the bigger story is Higgins because they franchise tagged him and he already asked for a trade in the offseason. So that's the one that's kind of on thin ice, and we're going to have to watch that story unfold because when you look at it, Jamar Chase, let's just assume he's going to be there at some point ready in the season. If they don't have T. Higgins, Jamar Chase gets doubled every time, and their backups aren't anything special right now. So, who are they throwing to? Boyd already is, he's on the Titans now. So you don't have Tyler Boyd. So it's really just going to come down to them. So, obviously, their head coach there, he's downplaying it. So he's like, both of them will be ready when the time comes and they need to be. So he seems to think, or at least telling the media that he's not worried. But if you're a Bengals fan, you can't help but wonder what's going to happen. And even if he is there, if he's franchise tagged, is he going to be mad about it? Is he not going to want to, if he gets a little injury, is he not going to play through it? Is he just going to sit out because he doesn't want to be there? What is the mental side of that comes along with it, right?
Well, and the big thing too is obviously Joe Burrow's coming off a terrible injury, right? They didn't have him last year, and they did not obviously have the season that they wanted. There's not a whole lot you can do about that when your star quarterback gets hurt early in the year and just can't come back. So, if I'm Joe Burrow, I'd be like, listen, man, we got another chance to actually do something here. Last year doesn't count. I get that. You had to make do with what you got, and they won a couple games with Jake Browning and whatever, but everything I've seen, I mean, yes, he's upset that he got franchise tag, and obviously he's a solid wide receiver, great number two option, could be a number one option probably on many other rosters. But everything I've kind of seen is, yeah, he's going to kind of play the long game and kind of hold out. But at the end of the day, I don't think at least it doesn't sound like he's going to go anywhere at least this year. And again, like you said, I don't think Joe Burrow would let that happen again. With especially if Jamar Chase is the only other quality wide receiver he's got to throw to. That's only going to make his job harder if he only has Chase to throw to. So, um, I get why Higgins is doing it. It's now athletes are very incentivized to get their money, as they should be. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'll be a heck of a storyline if he ends up not playing, or like you said, gets an injury and ends up sitting out, because he obviously doesn't want to exacerbate it more and potentially lose out on even more money in the future. But yeah, as a Bengals fan right now, I'd be a little puckered up for sure. I mean, not saying their championship window is closing, but every year it does get a little smaller, especially with Burrow getting these two big injuries early in his career, and and the AFC isn't getting any worse. So yeah, they're. I'd be a little worried for sure. I'm curious to see. Granted, it's almost only June, so we have plenty of time, and I'm sure Zach Taylor and that front office will give him some sort of deal that he hopefully won't refuse. It also would just be weird to see him either not play this year or be in another uniform. I mean, he won't, since he got tagged, and I have a hard time believing any team is going to want to ship out a quality amount of assets to then pay him a reasonable salary. So we'll see. I mean, it's tough right now saying, but definitely it's uh, tough waters right now for the Bengals in terms of their receiving core. So we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, dude. And I mean, it's not like they have many other guys to rely on. I mean, they lost Joe Mixon. I mean, yeah, they brought in who they brought in. What's his? Was it Moss?
I think they did bring in Zach Moss. Yeah.
To replace him, but I mean, it's not like they have a ton of weapons right now. If those guys keep holding out, so they will hopefully get it all figured out. But let's move on to a little QB roundup. A lot of uh, rookies in the mix now, plus some veterans that are fighting for jobs. This lead up to the season is going to be very interesting to watch. Some teams, head coaches, they have some big decisions to make, as there are a lot of QBs vying for position. So let's talk about one of the most, I don't want to call it controversial, it's not really controversial, but I guess a little bit of back and forth from fans, right? Is JJ McCarthy that guy? Did he go too high? Is he going to be able to prove why Minnesota took him where they did? Him and Sam Darnold are in that QB competition right now. Obviously, Darnold is their QB1 currently. McCarthy comes in. From what I hear, they like the way he's been
Mhm.
throwing. They think he is really stepped up to that next level like he needs to. They're kind of all echoing the words of Harbaugh, saying, how great he was of a player to
Mhm.
coach, things like that. For me personally, Will, I don't think JJ McCarthy, he would have to be so far above and beyond Darnold to surpass
Mhm.
him for the start of the season. I just don't see it happening, and I want to get your thoughts on this here. But I do see if Sam Darnold goes in, plays 3, 4 games, and isn't doing well, and McCarthy is showing that progress in practice, I could see them switching. I don't think there is a crazy threshold to flip flop the two of them
Mhm.
if McCarthy's doing well and Darnold seems to not be doing well. Um, but to start the season off, I just don't see McCarthy out battling Darnold when Darnold has experience. They things like that uh, in his belt, and McCarthy doesn't. I also think it's going to come down to whoever Justin Jefferson feels most comfortable throwing to him. But I think he has a big say in it. But what are your thoughts on that?
Everything you just said, I agree with. I mean, the biggest thing that I was thinking about yesterday when I was looking at this is there's two things here really. It's the proof is already in the pudding with Sam Darnold. We know what he's done. He's been in the league for so long. He's had chances to be the starter again in Carolina. They had a great start that year. They started, I think, 5-0, and then they just fell apart. And now he's been the token backup quarterback and kind of the journeyman these past couple of years, because he's obviously he has experience. He's been in the league. He knows how to read defenses, maybe not very well every time, but he's been there and he has that experience. But I agree with you. I mean, if you're going to take JJ McCarthy as a top 5 pick in the NFL draft when there are many other people you could have taken on defense, let alone at quarterback, um, I if he is that good, like you said, if he's head and shoulders above Darnold coming into the season, I wouldn't be surprised if he started. But, if it's a close race, why would you feel like more often than not throwing in a rookie quarterback at the beginning of the season normally does not pan out for franchises, especially with the development of a young guy. And no matter what that camp is saying, I feel like I don't know if they're over exacerbating how well he's doing, but he's not going to come in right away and just be an absolute dog. It's just not how that works. It's the NFL. Everyone's got to get up to speed. And like you said, if he's head and shoulders above, then maybe he'll start. But I could see Darnold. I see Darnold starting. And, if the Vikings kind of have a slow start and, they come out of week 6 with a 2-4 record or 1-5 or, you know, once there's a couple weeks down the road and they're not getting to where they want to be, then I think they could definitely bring in McCarthy and kind of say screw it and start the experiment early. And then the other thing, like you said, is Justin Jefferson. You have the arguably the best wide receiver, at least top 2-3 in the league on your team, and you're paying him a lot of money. So if he obviously doesn't like the way that Darnold's getting him the ball or getting him the ball at all, he's has weight in that locker room, and if that front office doesn't want to listen to him, that'd just be silly. And it's not like they're not going to, but so yeah, yeah, Justin Jefferson's been waiting for a quarterback to get him the ball. So I think whatever's clever. I think with the Vikings at this point, it's kind of nice in a sense that they have flexibility and they do have a bailout option, unlike the Denver Broncos last year, where we had Russell Wilson. And granted, he had a great season for us, but if he didn't, we didn't really have an option at backup quarterback. So even if Darnold stinks up the joint, they have a new guy that they can develop. And if for some reason they want to start JJ week 1 and he doesn't work out, then you can bring in a veteran backup that can maybe save your season or at least give McCarthy the time he needs to kind of get his bearings. But yeah, Minnesota's in an interesting spot here. They're obviously trying to win that division. I think they're a little bit far off of it, and I don't think starting a rookie quarterback week 1 is going to get them closer to their goal. So we'll see what happens. I hope McCarthy does well. I have no gripe against him. I don't think he should have been a top 5 pick.
Well, he was picked when? What number
Was
was
he
he?
5 or maybe? Excuse me. I think he was.
No, no,
Might
no,
have
no,
been.
no, no. He was low. He was lower in the
Maybe he was
draft.
12 now. I'm thinking about it. I haven't thought about the draft in a minute. It's been a month.
No, because the top 5
Oh,
were
Joe Alt went. You're right. Joe Alt went 5 to the Chargers. Never mind.
McCarthy went further
Yeah,
down. He was
you're right. Either way, he was a.
he was top 5 for the Vikings, but he wasn't. He was where the heck? Oh, he went 10.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Oh, that's right. Because I had the first 5. I had that first 5 futures bet, and I went 4 for 5. And the guy that screwed it up was me. For me, was JJ McCarthy not going to the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, which was looking back on it now, I'm like, gosh dang it. But that's why we bet. That's why it's fun. So, but
Well, I think we thought he was going to, if anything, that Harbaugh would trade with another team that needed a QB, and they would rush
well,
to
yeah,
get him.
they were talking about that 2 days before the draft, and that's why I was like, man, if they're going to get rid of Herbert, who else would they get to replace him?
Well, I didn't even think that they would get rid of Herbert, but I thought because they had that pick, they might trade with a team who needed a
Yeah,
QB, so they would trade down and use that so that someone could get McCarthy because some of that Harbaugh thought maybe McCarthy would be a good fit for, right? Because he could kind of help his boy
yeah,
out with also helping himself out by getting picks and trading someone up, but then they didn't end up trading; they ended up taking Alt.
yeah.
So. Um, well, you mentioned Justin Fields. That's another one that's in a QB battle here now with Russell Wilson over in Pittsburgh. Um, this is an interesting one. I will tell you what I like about this. Will is what I hate to see is when a team has a QB who may or may not struggle, right? Like you don't know what they're going to do going into the season. They've had good years, they've had bad years. they get a quarterback as their backup who plays a completely different
Hmm.
style. And then they switch him back out. They're like, "Well, he's not doing well, so let me put him in. Well, he's not doing well." And I'm like, "That's never gonna work." One guy is a dual threat quarterback, and one guy's a pocket passer, and the way that you schemed everything is towards, one player. So then the other player comes in, doesn't do well, and it's like, "Well, no
Hmm.
shit, he doesn't do well. He's in the complete wrong scheme now." What I do like about what Tomlin's done is Russell Wilson and Justin Fields play
Hmm.
similar
Hmm.
ball. It's not exactly the same, but both of them are decent passers. Russell Wilson probably a little bit more than Justin Fields, in my
Hmm.
opinion, and both of them can run. Justin Fields a little bit more than Russell Wilson now, probably because of youth at this point.
Hmm.
But both of them can play similar styles. So what Tomlin's now essentially done is, I think, if I'm him, I'm probably starting Russell Wilson unless Justin Fields just again, same type of thing, goes off somehow and just looks unbelievable. I think you start Russell Wilson and you have Fields ready to come in if Russell Wilson gets hurt or if he starts really playing bad. Then you put in Fields, but if you do that, he has to make a commitment. It has to be Fields for the rest of
Hmm.
the season because if you do what a lot of coaches have done lately, it seems, is they go this back and forth thing, and you kill the confidence of both
Hmm.
guys
Hmm.
because they're playing. They're like, if they have one pass, it's like, well, that's it. Now they're going to bring in the next guy, and so they can't even come back from an interception or come back from a knockdown pass because now they're nervous that the other guy is going to play over them, and that's not a good way to play.
Yeah.
It's you have to be loose when you're out there on the field. So I think he's done it where at least he doesn't have to change his scheme as much, and both of them should fit into that. Um, but I think you start Russell because of his accolades and what he's done and what he shows that has shown that he can still do. And then if he's not, and you let Fields learn from him, right? And then Fields becomes maybe Pittsburgh's franchise guy for the next five. Maybe he found the place that he should be, and he sits behind Russell Wilson this year and gets even more experience.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tomlin, as as every NFL fan knows, has never had a losing season in his career in the NFL, and I'd be damned, and I think he would be too, if either one of these guys are going to let that streak come to an end. So obviously, he's a bit of a decision to make, and he thankfully has some time to do it. But I agree with you. I mean, you did all these things to get Russell Wilson, and you're only paying him a little over $1 million. So even if you do take the gamble with him, which I don't even think it, like you said, it's not much of a gamble, just because we've seen it before. He's been in the league for a lot longer. Obviously, Justin Fields was on a terrible Bears team that did not give him any help, and the front office didn't give him any help either. So but yeah, I would start Wilson, one because of the experience, and two because you don't have anything to lose with him at this point. You're not paying him much money. The Broncos have the bulk of that contract, and if he doesn't work out, then what do? You put him on the bench and you pay the 1.2 million or whatever you're paying him, and you call it a day. And then you hopefully develop,
Yeah.
and then he can help develop Justin Fields and get him to where he needs to be. Um, but also too, Russell Wilson had a great year last year, especially compared to his first year with the Broncos. He had a great year. He had a 66% completion percentage, went over 3,000 yards, and had a great touchdown to interception ratio of 26 touchdowns to 8 picks. So, that's solid. He's obviously showing a little more confidence in his game again, which I thought was pretty surprising after how much Sean Payton verbally did not like him in Denver. And then, of course, he just
Yeah.
took that negative hate and fueled him because he obviously had a great year, which was good to see. I hate it because it has screwed my franchise for the long term in terms of dead cap space and all that jazz. But that's,
What do you mean, dude? You're riding. Let's
oh,
ride, bro.
man. It is funny to me, though, on a side note, that you would think Russell Wilson would maybe approach his arrival in Pittsburgh a little differently, but he literally did the same exact things that he did in Denver. He was throwing out first pitches at Pirates games and doing all these things. And, everybody, at least I was like, oh, man, this doesn't look like it looks like a little bit of deja vu. So, but I think the big thing too for both of these guys that's going to be huge for both of their developments and how they perform this year is at least from what I've seen, and I think the most of the league has seen, is Pittsburgh wants them in the locker room, both of them, and that's huge, like you said, for confidence. Having quarterbacks and NFL players, but mainly quarterbacks in the NFL, have a short leash already, unless you're, of course, Pat Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen, or these guys that are well established as a franchise quarterback and they're not going to move on. But majority of NFL quarterbacks have a very short leash, and when your leash is even shorter than the average quarterbacks, it's tough to even just get up in the morning with confidence. So I think them being in a place that at least is perceived as they want them there is huge. And I mean, besides that, daunting undefeated record of never having a losing season for Mike Tomlin. Besides that, I mean, I think he's in a great spot in terms of, he doesn't have much to
Yeah.
lose here. And, it's not like the Steelers are one guy away from winning the Super Bowl. So, but I mean,
It's much easier for Wilson because of his career. Like, he's at the tail
yeah,
end. So, like you said, he's got nothing to
nothing
lose.
to
I mean, you
lose.
just go out, have a good time, and if you end up the backup, I mean, maybe it's a little bit hitting the heart as an athlete, in the confidence level, but you're there at that point, if you keep a good attitude, they'll keep you on the team just to get Fields up to par,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
And there's one
you got a better job. You can sit back, relax, make
I was gonna
millions,
say,
and
man. I mean, there's one thing we know about
help the
Russell
guy next
Wilson.
to you.
That is the thing I hated the most about him in Denver was just we would get spanked, and then he'd still have such a just optimistic press conference after the game. I'm like, dude, we suck. Why don't you just say it? And so at least, even if I have a hard time believing, even if Russell loses that job, he will be a bad teammate. He seems to be a pretty solid locker room guy, even when he doesn't want to be. He's good at putting on a face, or maybe that's just who he is. But, so yeah, Steelers are in a good spot. You know, they got two guys and they'll have to make a decision. It'd be kind of crazy. They're not going to, but it'd be crazy if they pulled a little Nick Saban with Alabama a couple years ago with Tua and Jalen Hurts and ran a little two quarterback system. I don't think anybody's done that in the NFL for a long time, or at least for consistently for a long time. So that would be kind of shisty. But yeah, I'm sure Wilson will get the starting job, and they'll do kind of what the Vikings will do with McCarthy and Andy Dalton. Probably reassess if things aren't going their way halfway through the season or after 5-6 weeks, and kind of go from there. But um, yeah,
Yeah.
there's almost spitting images of each other, at least Russell Wilson in his prime to Justin Fields now in terms of their athleticism and kind of the skill sets they have, which is cool to see. So if anybody's going to be developing Justin Fields, I'm pretty glad it's Russell Wilson, to be honest with you. So
Yeah, I mean, I think Justin Fields has um, a great career ahead of him. I think he's definitely suffered going to the Bears, and had to face some adversity early, but I think it's only going to help him. I think he's going to come out as a much better player from it. So I'm excited to see the rest of his career, especially under Mike Tomlin, because I just think that guy is such a player's coach, but in a way that's almost, in my opinion, better than Pete Carroll, the way he's a player's coach. Like, I just think Tomlin seems like almost like a father
mhm.
figure, and just like hard on his guys, but a player's coach. Like, everyone loves him, but like I feel like he could just motherfuck you if he wanted to, and you would just accept it and go back and do your job. Whereas I feel like Pete Carroll, he was such a player's coach, but I feel like he was more like a let's have fun.
Mhm.
Like, I'm sure he did like give people to business, but I don't know. I feel like Fields is in such a good place with Mike Tomlin. I feel like it's going to only excel his career. I feel like he's going to excel with him there, but we'll
Well, and
see.
speaking of, well,
Another,
just quickly, just speaking of motherfucking, do you remember that pregame video? Mike Tomlin's walking through the tunnel. He's got his Microsoft Surface, looking at whatever scheme, something, and this poor like 45, 50-year old Steelers fan just goes, "Go Steelers, go Mike!" And he looks at him and goes, "I'm working here," and it's like, oh man, dude, like, just God, that guy,
yeah,
that guy's
sometimes they're locked in, dude.
that dude's the closest thing to Samuel L. Jackson since Samuel L. Jackson. It seems like it's.
Yeah, you get caught in the crossfire sometimes. Unfortunately, with coaches, dude, they get in
I
their
know it
zone,
was
and they
like a
do not want to
Thursday
be
night
disturbed.
football
But
game. Like I don't even think they were playing any bit good, but I respect it. But it was just so funny. I was like, oh man, dude, like don't mess with this guy. My God.
yeah, another battle we were talking about. And this one I think is less on people's radars just because of who it is. But Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. I know you were talking about it last night. Um, Aiden O'Connell finished off the season. Actually, was seemed to be getting some momentum, doing pretty
You could see
decent.
it's
Obviously, Gardner Minshew is yeah, Minshew's come in at times and performed really well. He's obviously been a huge backup for the teams that he's been on, and a starter as well in Jacksonville when he was there for a little while, doing well. Um, my personal take, and this one we may actually disagree, so we'll see. My personal take is I think you start Aiden O'Connell, and I'm going to tell you why. I think Aiden O'Connell, with how he finished off last year, the confidence he has, the momentum going into it. Clearly, guys, he bought into the team mentality with Pierce. Um, I think Minshew knows he may not because he's an athlete and no athlete wants to admit it, but I think everyone else knows that Minshew is a great backup
mhm,
quarterback. I don't think Minshew is a great starting quarterback. That's just I think if you need Minshew to win you a couple games or keep you relevant in the
mhm.
season, I think he can do that. Do I think Gardner Minshew is going to lead a team to a Super Bowl? I do not. Aiden O'Connell, I don't know. I just don't have enough evidence behind what he's able to do yet. So I think you give, and that's going against everything I said and all the other guys. I think Minshew probably has the better stats overall just because he's been in the league longer. I think he obviously knows the league. He knows the speed of the league. He has that feel, but I just think you have to give Aiden that chance, and then Minshew's always there if you need him. That's my
No,
thoughts.
totally. And I have two questions. Have the did the Raiders actually sign Antonio Pierce to be their head coach yet? Did they do that?
I
That's
think
what I
so. Yeah.
thought, but I don't remember like seeing the headline, and I thought it'd be. And I one just on a side note would be so silly if they didn't, because he obviously revitalized that franchise in the middle of a terrible season. But um, yeah, I mean, all three of these quarterback situations with these three franchises are kind of similar in the sense of I agree with you in terms of let Aiden O'Connell do his thing until it doesn't work, and then you have a safety blanket in Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew obviously had a great year last year with the Colts, and that's why he got this decent sized contract to go to the Raiders and still has a job. Um, my big thing with Aiden O'Connell is obviously we don't have a big enough sample size to know. He, like I said right when you started talking about it, he did beat the Chiefs last year. But the stat that keeps popping into my mind about that game is in the second half, even though they won that game, he didn't. I don't think he threw the ball more than twice in that second half.
Yeah.
So that makes me nervous. And the other thing on top of that is the Raiders don't have Josh Jacobs anymore. So, and that's how they were getting around him having him throwing is they had a solid running back in their backfield. So, and now that they don't have him, I'm a little worried that he's obviously going to have to throw the ball a lot more, and we'll see how he does, how he's been developing this offseason, and what he's going to be looking like towards OTA or towards training camp. But I agree with you. I mean, what do the Raiders again have to lose at this point as well? Like they're not going to go to the Super Bowl. They're not. They're probably not going to win the AFC West as long as the Chiefs and Chargers are around. And I mean, yeah, they gotta. I just continue to keep going up. I mean, Antonio Pierce isn't stupid. He obviously brought back that franchise in the middle of a terrible year after Josh McDaniels sold their season early. Um, and I think he knows what it's like to ride the hot hand because he was the hot hand. And, if Aiden O'Connell keeps, progressing in a good rate, I get that you're paying I know you're paying Gardner Minshew more money, but, if you can get Aiden O'Connell on a cheap deal, which he is, and get some good production out of him, why wouldn't you keep it going? So, and it's a good story. I mean, I didn't even know who the kid was until he started starting and whatever. But he's obviously shown that he can be in the league. Can he be a starting quarterback for 17 games in a full season? We'll see. But
You can only find that out one
yeah,
way, right?
no, totally. And so that's everybody, and that's what I think is so funny about just pro sports. And we like to think we know what we're talking about, and so does every fan that watches games and everything. And they're like, oh, why did that front office do that? And it's like, well, you don't really know until you try. So Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Raiders fan obviously because I'm a Broncos fan, and they're my arch rivals, and I love to see them do terrible. But if this no name quarterback from Purdue ends up getting a starting job and does something with it, you got to be a fan of the sport. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see what Antonio Pierce does. I believe in him. I respect the heck out of him as a coach, and I think he's making every right decision for that franchise, at least right now. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean,
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think Pierce was signed in January, by the way, just to answer your
okay.
question. After
Oh, that's right.
his
That's right. God, it
intern,
feels like years ago now that we've been doing NBA and all this other stuff. I'm like, it feels like football is so
I
far
know,
away ago, but
man.
it really.
It's hard to remember all the freaking information.
I know.
All right, we got about 15 minutes left. So what I really want to talk about, because I also want to get back, we got to go back to the NBA and get your bets for everyone. What I really want to talk about though is this Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye situation. Um, the question I am posing to you, and I will also give you my thoughts on it, are Caleb Williams obviously taken first overall. A lot of stuff came out about Caleb that he wanted all this stuff to be, go to a certain team and all this stuff, whatever. Um, some people felt the Pats should not have taken Drake Maye and that they would have been better off taking Marvin Harrison or Neighbors and then getting a QB later down, maybe McCarthy or someone like that. Obviously, they took Drake Maye. They saw something in him. There's some stuff going around. I know that you mentioned about his release and how long it takes. Jayden Daniels, on the other hand, has seemed to be balling out as people expected. Um, Obviously, great quarterback out of LSU, but in a bit of a tough situation at the Commanders. I would say when you look at those three teams matched up, the Commanders, um, you know, they have some other pieces they're missing. So when we look back on this year, when we get through this year and we look back, what is it going to take from you to say Caleb Williams was the right choice to take first overall? What does he need to do at the Bears? How many wins do they have to have for him to be the right choice for that team to be their franchise quarterback over Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye? And what do the other two guys have to do to have successful seasons in your eyes? What's a successful season look like for Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye or Caleb Williams?
Just starting off with the number one overall guy, Caleb Williams. I think the biggest three things. I'm going to kind of give three things for each. What I want to see, and I think what most people should be expecting if they want to actually say, "Oh, this was the right pick in the first year." Granted, I know it takes time. I'm sure I'll say some of these things and then in year two they'll do it or whatever. But this is what I need to see. First thing, and it's kind of tough for Caleb Williams because obviously he's the number one pick. He has the most expectations. But my big thing is you got to win more than 7 games. You won 7 games last year with Justin Fields. You won 5 out of your last 8 to end the year. So they had a pretty solid end of the season given that they started 0-4. So first one, win more than 7 games, even if it's 8. That's fine with me. If you can get close to 500, maybe even one game above 500, that's huge for the Bears because they've had nothing but a losing culture since the past, since forever. So that don't start 0-4. I think the moment you lose a couple games in a row, especially if it's early, that narrative is going to get bad quick, as we've seen with Justin Fields. Granted, this front office drafted him. That's their guy. They're much more behind him. They're not going to throw 10 sheets to the wind if they start 0-5. But I think that Caleb Williams needs to come in. He needs to win games. He needs to win them early. And he also just needs to make the Bears exciting again. He needs to give that locker room, that franchise, that organization a feeling of, man, we did make the right decision. And if you win games and don't lose a lot in a row, that's going to be pretty easy to obtain. So Am I going to say that he needs to make the playoffs in year one? Yes, of course. You'd love to see your rookie quarterback just excel and take your team from the gutter to the playoffs in 1 year, but that's not going to happen. But Caleb Williams needs to kind of put his money where his mouth is at this point, and I'm not saying he needs to make Heisman-like throws like he did 2 years ago at USC, but he needs to show everyone that he is the real deal, and that's going to come strictly from winning games. I mean, there's no really other way to do it. That, and if he
Yeah.
if he can go over 3,000 passing yards and have a solid touchdown to interception ratio, that will only help. But at the end of the day, it's pretty clear for me with the Bears, they got to just win games because they haven't won a lot in the past good while, and that's just what it comes down to for me. And it's kind of the same things with Jane Daniels. I don't expect him to bring this kind of broken Commanders organization out of the gutter, but they got rid of Sam Howell. He almost had 4,000 passing yards in his rookie season last year. With how bad that team was, that dude's got a cannon. So, do I need Jane Daniels to throw for 4,000 plus yards in his first season? No, but I need him to look efficient. I need him to replicate what we're hearing out of training camp so far, and that he can sling the football efficiently, quickly, make the right reads. But my biggest thing too, as well, is you got to get something going with Terry McLaurin. That dude could be a top 10, top 15 easily wide receiver in the league. And given that who's been throwing to him for his whole career, he just doesn't look like it. He barely got over 1,000 yards last year, even with Sam Howell throwing dang near 4,000. So if he can get a solid relationship, a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, a what used to be Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs type of relation, AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts type of relationship going, and get it going early and make it apparent, I think that would be huge for Jayden Daniels, and that organization. I think that'll be a clear sign that, okay, this guy is the real deal, and this was the right choice of getting rid of a guy that in his rookie year almost threw for 4,000 yards, and now we just spent a second overall pick on a guy that, yes, won the Heisman, but is a little older and yada yada yada. So, yeah, for him to get McLaurin going and show the Commanders that they have at least their quarterback for the next couple of seasons, I think is the huge thing for him. Granted, they are in a tough division. I think the Commanders will finish over the Giants, but they're obviously going to have a hard time competing with the Eagles and the Cowboys in that NFC East. But it's pretty easy for me with Jayden Daniels. I think he has the least amount of pressure given in the organization that he's in, and I don't think a lot of people are expecting a lot out of the Commanders, even though they have the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft. So if he can just have a solid foundational year, improve, make McLaurin the wide receiver he should be, maybe win 6-7 games, that would be, I think, ideal for Jane Daniels. And going into Drake Maye, I mean, it's kind of easy for him to one up what happened last year in the Patriots. They won 4 games. They did that whole flip flop thing with Zappy and Mac Jones, and now Mac Jones is in.
Well, I do think he has to win like at least 3 or 4 more games
Oh, for sure.
minimum, for people not to put him in that same bucket as Mac
100%.
Jones. That's
That
gonna
was my
be
big thing is, he has to win more than 4 games. And like you said, I would say, yeah, he needs to win at least 6 or 7 games for them to be like, all right, this was the right call. And the big thing is but it's going to be interesting just because they have a brand new head coach in Rod Mayo. And I'm just curious to see what if there even will be the new Patriot way, which I'm sure there will be, but they probably won't call it that since that's Bill Belichick's trademark. But I'm curious to see really, he had a lot of hype around him. He was, halfway through the college football season, they were saying he was going to go number 1 over Caleb Williams. Does he need to be Tom Brady in his prime year 1? No, that's not going to happen because he's the GOAT and that's hard to replicate. But yes, Drake Maye needs to win at least 7-8 games. He's got to be competitive. That's the biggest thing. Patriots weren't competitive last year. If he can make the Patriots competitive, maybe they win 5-6 games. Their record looks terrible, but if they're losing all those games by a touchdown or less, you can't be that upset in terms of where you were last year and how inefficient your quarterback play was. And also the big thing off quarterback play, if he can just have a positive touchdown interception ratio, if he's not throwing a lot of picks, not turning the ball over, not making bad reads, not forcing the issue, I think a lot of Patriots fans will at least feel good about taking this guy at 3 when you obviously could have had Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors or another good wide receiver. But at the end of the day, too, who are you going to have throwing him the ball? Bailey Zappi, like so. It's tough when a franchise has such a bad year, and then there are so many assets on the board at obviously the third overall pick in the draft, and you have to make a tough decision. So obviously the Patriots are under the microscope. All three of these teams are under the microscope and will be through these guys' rookie deals. But yeah, Drake May's
Well, it would have been just FYI, it would have been Jacoby Brissett. We would have had Jacoby throwing to him, at least for this year, which that was my piece. I thought I was one of the people who thought they should have taken Harrison or Neighbors and then tried to grab a quarterback lower. And my reasoning behind it was because I don't know if Drake May's first year is going to be any better than Jacoby Brissett's would have been,
sure, sure,
right? So the thing was like, why not get a quote unquote possible generational talent in your wide receiving core, and then have Brissett throw to him for a year and either build up a guy like McCarthy this year, trade up and get him, or um, get a get a guy, next year if someone's coming out. I got to look at see who's coming out next year, but something like that. Instead of getting Drake May and then having the same year that Brissett would have been behind center anyway. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. To piggyback on what you said, going back to Caleb Williams, and this is a big ask for a rookie QB, but I think with all the hype around Caleb Williams, and not all the hype, not just all the hype, and not just all the hype that he caused too, mind you, with what he quote unquote asked for,
hmm
and how he has kind of been and presented himself to a lot of people. I think they have to go second in the North. And that's hard because I think they'll beat the Vikings. I don't think that they definitely have to beat the Vikings. Let's just put that out there. The Vikings should come in fourth. It should be last in their division again, like with what they have right now. Um, Detroit's probably still going to be at the top. I mean, they're going to probably still be kicking
hmm
ass. So it's going to come down to, can you beat Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers? And that's tough. But when you look at who they have put around Caleb Williams, he has DJ Moore. He has Keenan Allen, who is a veteran and is a still crushing
hmm
it. Um, and then you have DeAndre Swift in your backfield, and you have Brian Robinson in your backfield, who's been a proven just like hard nosed back for those hard
hmm
yards. And they got a Dunes right from Washington. So your wide receiving core and your running back core are above
And you have Cole
average, I
Kmet.
would say. Average or above average. And on top of that, your offensive line isn't bad
hmm
anymore. I was looking at the rankings, the preseason rankings, and the Bears' offensive line is like 10,
Damn, that's
right?
crazy.
It's not
No,
bad. And even if you don't agree with that, you still have to put them in the top half of the league. They're 15 or better,
hmm
right? So I'll give you plus or minus 5. They're still in the top half. When you look at the Patriots and the Commanders, their rankings for their offensive lines are like
mm
30, 31. I mean, they are like terrible, right? So when we're going to be looking at the same Bryce Young situation where, Jayden Daniels or Drake May not have time. And the Patriots have, they're kind of in that weird, like one side is good, but the other half of their offensive line is
yeah,
like if you're blitzing from one
yeah,
side,
yeah,
clearly.
totally.
But they don't have, I mean, the Pats have what? Polk, who they got, who could be great, but we don't know
hmm
yet. Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas as their starting three. And yes, they have KJ Osborne and Juju Smith behind them. So they have some people there. I wouldn't call them dudes, but they got a couple
TJ
guys.
Osborne had like two
And then
good
they have,
games last year. He had, when he
yeah,
popped off and everybody
he's
was
just
like
inconsistent.
scrambling to grab him on the waivers. And then it's the classic, oh, this guy has 2 good weeks. You grab him, you play him that third week. Classic.
Sucks. Yeah. They have Ramondre Stevenson, obviously, who will hopefully be, bring it back this year, and after injury prone. And then Antonio Gibson came over. So, we'll see with that, what they can do with that. The Commanders, honestly, like you said, they have McLaurin and they have Jahan
hmm
Dotson, but they're their backfield is, they have Eckler
Oh,
and
yeah,
Brian
I forgot
Robinson,
they got
right?
Eckler. That's crazy. Oh, man.
So so Jayden Daniels might be doing a couple of little drop downs just in their thing. I think for them, I agree with you 100%. I would, and maybe I just have high expectations too because I plus in a couple numbers, but I think they have to win 7 or 8 games to be. I think the Patriots have to beat the Bills, to be honest, with everyone the Bills lost. The Bills are in
Mhm,
shambles right now.
mhm.
And they could go from top to bottom, from first to worst. I could see it happening. And honestly, they should beat the Jets at least one of the two
Mhm.
games. Aaron Rodgers, he's coming off an Achilles injury. I know he's Aaron Rodgers, but I just don't see it being amazing. Um, I think we all know Miami is probably the best team in that conference right now. I don't think the Patriots are going to beat
No,
Miami. I don't think
there's
they
no
have a chance.
there's
But I think if they win 7 games, 8 games, I think they'll be good. Commanders, I agree with you. I think they have to beat the Giants in their division. I think if they're at 3, but they're 8-9, 9-8, something like that, I think they're okay. They're not going to beat the Eagles. The Eagles are
yeah,
stacked
you're right.
with Saquon and AJ Brown and Jalen and freaking Devontae Smith. I mean, they're just stacked, and their defense is
Mhm.
stacked. And you know, Giants definitely be beat. Who am I forgetting?
Cowboys, the old cowgirl.
Cowboys. Yes, I don't know. Of
Yeah,
course,
of
yeah,
course,
of course,
not
I'll
hard
forget
to
them.
forget.
Uh, Cowboys will be hard to beat, right? They're gonna win 10 games and then they're gonna blow it in the playoffs like usual, 10 to 12 games and then do nothing in the playoffs. So it's we'll see what happens. They got Zeke
You know
back,
what's
so
crazy too? Guess who's up for another fucking contract extension? Dak Prescott.
Dak. Oh
We were
yeah,
just
Dak. Of
it
course
seems
he
like
is.
we were talking about that 2 years ago. And they would, "Oh, he's gonna get all this money and he's not worth it," and it's like, "Holy cow."
He's
Times
not
are
worth
just
it.
he's not, but
He's worth. I get people like saying he wins 10 games, and I get that, and some guys can't do that. But like at some point, winning 10, 12 games is the same as winning 4 games if you're doing nothing in the playoffs, right? Like at some point, it
I
comes to
forget who
that.
tweet some I can't remember who tweeted it, but right after they kept McCarthy and didn't make any moves in the offseason, some big broadcast name, someone was like, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." And it's like, yeah, what do you?
It was probably either Stephen A or Shannon
Yeah,
Sharp. It's probably one of
yeah.
those two.
Speaking of insanity, but yeah, we'll see what I mean, I will stay. I will die on this hill until I die. Is that if Jerry Jones was not the GM of that team, they would have won a Super Bowl by now. But that poor man just can't let it go.
Yeah.
So sorry, Dallas, but you're going to
But
keep suffering until that dude kicks the can. Unfortunately,
it's brutal, man. Well, they're all in this year, dude.
dude,
They're
they're
all
all in
in.
every year. Get out of here! Like,
Spend the money, dude.
spend the
All in,
money.
except then
Oh,
they make
no,
zero
I have all
moves
this
during
money.
free
Yeah, but I'm
agency.
not going to spend a cent in free agency. Oh man, it's like, okay.
That's so brutal, man. But listen, I think that's what those guys got to do to have
100%.
successful seasons. I do think that Caleb Williams he's got the most to prove, and he has the best team behind him to do it. So yes, he has the highest expectations, but I think all those expectations are legitimate expectations because he has the weapons. So do something
Yeah.
with them. Well, man, I know we're over an hour here, so let's circle back around to our to basketball, to NBA, and let's get your frisky risky picks. Give us 3 to 5 frisky risky bets that our listeners are going to want to throw their money down on.
Biggest thing, well, just going into it, I guess. Game 5 tomorrow night in Minneapolis, 6:30 p.m. 8:30 Eastern. But T Wolves obviously at home. They're a 5-point favorite. Early line for Vegas. It's probably going to move not much. They opened. I checked last night, right after Game 4 ended. They opened as just flat out -4-point favorites. It's now moved to 4.5, so now they're obviously 5. Um, I don't like the Mavs or the Timberwolves money lines. Plus 158 is juicy, but I honestly don't think Dallas closes out this series on the road. They're now 2-2 in closeout games this postseason, and both of those wins have come on at home. Excuse me, not on the road, at home. So I'm going to say stay away from the money lines. The things that I like, and you're going to have to get it now, definitely sooner rather than later, is the over 209. It's going to be another high scoring event. 209 isn't crazy high scoring, but for what this series has been, it has been. It hit in the last two games, so I like that a lot. At over 209.5 total points. The other one that I will say, if you want to take the Mavs, maybe take them on the points, but I'm still not the biggest fan of it. I would just stay away from it completely. I think it, and if they prove me wrong and close out a game on the road for once in their lives, then so be it. But in terms of
It
yeah, it
happens.
happens. But in terms of making money, I'd stay away from the spread and the money line just because it's too. The numbers are weird, and Vegas knows what they're doing, of course. So I like the over though, and then I got three other ones. My biggest one is Cat over 20.5. He had 25 last night. Finally, I know he was struggling in the first three games of this series. He was receiving the bulk of the criticism as Anthony Edwards is number two and kind of the veteran presence that needed to support their superstar. And he finally had a good game last night. He shot the ball very well. He went 9 for 13 from the field, 4 for 5 from three. I love him to go over 20.5. Is he going to score 25 again? No. But if Minnesota wants a chance of extending the series and going back to Dallas for game six, he's going to have to score at least 20 plus points. So I like him over 20.5. I feel good about that. But it's pretty much even money. I think it's minus 115. The next one I like is Mike Conley over 2.5 rebounds. I know that's a small number. Most people would just latch onto it. I really like it because he's hit it in his last 5 out of 7 games. Mike Conley isn't a rebounding machine, but as we've seen in this series and honestly this whole playoffs, he is just being that gritty veteran presence at point guard that the Timberwolves and I'm sure any other team would love to have on their team, and the Timberwolves have been very happy to have it. And 3 rebounds isn't crazy. He loves to get into the paint anyway. He's not going to go for 6. He's not going to go for 7. But 3 rebounds is very obtainable. And again, the numbers show he's hit it in his last 5 out of 7. I don't know what else you need to hear with that. That's a great percentage. So Mike Conley over 2.5 boards. That's at about minus 130. So Vegas thinks it is going to happen. But, minus 130, it's not the best odds, but it's not the worst. You're still going to make some good money. And, at the end of the day, green is green. Making money is good. So Mike Conley over 2.5 rebounds. And then the other one is this is a little more risky just because it's plus 105, but he had 4.
It is the Frisky
Yeah,
risky,
oh yeah.
baby.
Well, and I got 2. This is my first of the risky, but Mike Conley 2 plus steals. I know everybody might be like, if you watch the game last night, he had 4, and if you look at his last couple of games before that, he's only had 1. The purely why I'm going for this is 1 for the value at plus 105. You can double your money. You got a little juice, and 2 if Minnesota's going to force another game, he's going to have at least 2 steals because that's how they won last night. They won off turnovers. They forced 15 turnovers, and they've scored 30 points off those turnovers last night. So is Mike Conley, again, going to go crazy and have 4 steals? Maybe, maybe not. But I think if he's going to be the primary lockdown defender that they need him to be, he's going to have to do that. So to get 2 plus steals at plus 105, I'd feel good about that, especially in another elimination game for a Timberwolves team that's fighting for their lives. And then my final pick, it's a futures pick. It's for the Finals MVP. Obviously, Boston is already in the NBA Finals. We know that. We're just waiting for this Western Conference Finals to get wrapped up. I wouldn't say take the Celtics to win the championship because if you want to make $100, you have to put 230 down at minus 230 odds. Dallas, surprising enough, even though they dropped that game last night, they're still plus 200 to win the NBA Finals. So just keep that in mind. And Minnesota, even though they're probably not going to force Game 7 and win that series, they went before Game 4, they were plus 1,700, and now they are plus 1,500. So if you really want to get juicy and sweat out a damn near impossible bet, you can take that. But my bet that I really like is Jaylen Brown to win Finals MVP at plus 600. Third best odds to do it. The leader is obviously Jason Tatum at minus 135, and then the next best is Luka Doncic at plus 230. Those two are obviously the faces of their respective franchises. the narrative obviously will be around Jason Tatum in the NBA Finals. He's been their star player since the get go. But Jaylen Brown, I'm sure some people have already forgotten he won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Granted, that's the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. It's not even that big of an award, but he averaged damn near 30 doing it. And he just looks like a different kind of guy this year in this postseason. Granted, oh man, stop. Sorry, my dad's trying to call me. Granted, he excuse me. Jason Tatum hasn't been terrible this postseason, but he has been very inconsistent for my liking. Game 3 he has 36 points, and then game 4 he only has like 22. So, I like the value at plus 600. My only worry is that if Boston really shows up well, Jason Tatum finally puts together a complete series, that minus 135 is going to look pretty locky. But I really, and especially in the risky category, I like Jaylen Brown to win Finals MVP at plus 600. Even mid game, I was watching it of game 4 of that Pacers game, their closeout game. I was checking, you could check his odds throughout the game for him to win Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And at one point, it went down all the way to plus 100, and then it would shoot back up to plus 1700, down to plus 800. And then the fluctuation was crazy throughout the game. And near the end of the game, right before he won the award, it ended at plus 800, and he ended up winning. So, I think obviously Vegas is trying to show that the narrative around these two superstars in Doncic and Tatum. But if you want value, and we've also seen in past couple of finals that not always the quote unquote best player on the roster wins Finals MVP. Granted, this was a good couple of years ago, but Andre Iguodala's won a Finals MVP. So at plus 600, I think it's definitely worth a sprinkle. But I feel good about that, especially the way he's been playing. He's looked like a man possessed, honestly, and he's kind of hit a different gear this postseason. And you can tell he's ready to become an NBA champion, as well as the rest of that roster. But I love Jaylen Brown to win Finals MVP at plus 600.
There it is, man. The Frisky risky bets from the man himself, the legend, Willy P. Putting that money in your pocket. I don't know what you got going on. Maybe you need some money for a little July 4th get together, as that's coming up here soon enough, or whatever it may
Almost the
be.
end of the
But,
month, friends.
Follow Willy P. Rents too. Follow Willy P. Also, follow us on all our social media predictors. Willie's P is always putting up those bets on all the different social media channels. So make sure you're following that for even more money making bets. We will catch you back here next week. Also, make sure that you sign up for our newsletter. Not only will this podcast be on it, but also a lot of other information, injury information, and news from around the different leagues. So follow that and more fantasy and betting stuff, especially as we get closer and closer to football season. So we'll see you back here next week. Frisky Risky Podcast. Thanks for watching.